by saying, hi, my name is Jay. I'm from Aerometrics. So I'm head of S&B at Metromap. And along with myself is my colleague Daniel O'Donnell, head of product. And today we welcome you to Metromap webinar for small and medium businesses. So first of all, our company Aerometrics has been established for over 40 years now, building a strong national and international reputation as leading practitioners of aerial imagery, 3D modeling, and LiDAR surveys. Now, Metromap is our 2D product, which we launched in 2019 as the business became a publicly listed company in Australia. So today's session, we'll learn about the key features of Metromap that gives you tools to quote faster by reducing site visits, understanding more about a site and its immediate surroundings, allowing you to plan and make better informed decisions. As we cover today's numerous aspects of Metromap, we will be recording the session and we'll make this available for you to review afterwards. We also encourage you to make use of the Q&A chat room that we have. And if enough time permits, we will answer some questions at the end of the webinar. But not to worry if we don't get to your questions, as we will follow up with you afterwards. Now, for today, I will hand you over to Daniel, who will now launch a demonstration of the Metromap Map Viewer, including our imagery available and the tools to allow you to win more business. Over to you, Daniel.
Great, thank you, Jay. And I'd also like to extend that thanks to everyone that has taken some time out of your busy schedules to be here. What we will begin with is just to provide you with a little insight as to the takeaways that you will get from the session today. So what we want to do is ensure that you understand how you'll be able to quote with confidence by establishing that accurate ground truth, understanding everything that's at a location from a desktop without having to go on site. We'll show you how to use the tools that will allow you to mark up on site. That can be labeling, it can be assessing things that you might need to consider for when you're communicating to a client, or it's even to allow you to assess the area that surrounds it that may present some obstacles or may have other considerations for certain points of interests that may impact your access to that site. We'll show you how to download high resolution imagery. You'll be able to then input that into your quotations, your proposals, and so make them far more professional looking. And we'll also talk to you about how you can then access our high resolution imagery from other tools, so integrating into AutoCAD, Google Earth, or other GIS type tools. Now, with our product suite, we provide you with the ability to measure things on site, and that becomes quite complex when you start looking at other obstacles at that particular location. So we will learn to use some of the tooling to do that, and then look at access routes, as we talked about. That could even be the widths in roads, and then do other image overlays or other data overlays to assess what's happening at a location. You'll be able to take very complex profiling of a site, whether that's a large area or a small area, and that'll help you to determine terrain and surface objects and the heights at those particular locations. And we'll show you how you can compare images from over time. So accessing our vast back catalogue of imagery, you can see change that's happened to the site. And that also indicates that you'll also be able to see change occur as we capture more imagery into the future. We'll show you how to use tools to assess sites from multiple angles. So here's an example of looking at it from the ground and the air and being able to assess or undertake more detailed assessment with those two viewing angles, as well as our oblique imagery. We'll provide you with some guidance on doing some feature overlays, and they will also help to be able to extract or remove certain objects from an image so that you can see what's on the ground without having to visually inspect everything. So now what I'm going to do is take us over to a live demonstration of our product. And we'll start with doing a very specific and detailed assessment of a particular site. So when you log into the MetroMap map viewer, you're always presented with the entire nation of Australia, and you can quickly see where our high resolution imagery coverage is available. So we cover around 95% of the Australian population, and then we go and recapture that coverage area as well to ensure that you've constantly got access to newer and more current imagery. So for this exercise, we're going to start with looking at a particular site where we're going to undertake a roof maintenance job. And so using search, we're able to go straight to that particular location, and it's going to give you a drop you at point on the map where that particular site is. And I'm just going to then take that particular point because I want to be able to save that for later use and just move that to the back of the property. And now I'm able to get a clear view of the particular roof and the maintenance that I may need to undertake. So whether or not you're doing a solar installation or a roof replacement, or you could be installing some plant equipment, the same tooling can be used for any of those particular use cases. So what I'm going to start with is looking at a particular area where we're going to be undertaking maintenance. So we can see this discoloured area of the roof. What I'm going to do is determine the actual size of that particular area by using the drawing tool. And as you can see, we can create multiple points to get just the particular shape we want. Now, it doesn't matter if you don't get it right the first time. It is easy enough just to double click on the particular object and then start to make those adjustments that you may need to make it exactly as you require. Now, that's just the starting point. There's going to be a lot of other items within this particular site that you're also going to be having to consider. They may be obstructions, they may be things that you need to consider that might create an issue when you're on that particular site, or you're trying to get access to that particular area, or if you're removing objects that you may need to consider additional work that needs to be done. So for this particular location, I'm just going to do is I'm going to add a marker. I'm going to say there's a vent here, and I'm able to just pop up to this point. I'm going to say that here is the vent. I'm going to label our roof section. And then I can continue to add more and more information to the map. So we might say that there is a cooler here. But it's not just about what's on the roof, it's also about how you access that roof. So for this particular site, we can see there's a caravan, and it looks like there is an access route down the side of the property. But we're also going to have to get certain equipment down that particular site. So we want to be able to measure exactly how much width we're going to have to work with. So just going between the roof line and the fence, we're able to determine that we have site access about 1.8 meters in width. But then we can also start to look at other things that are going to assist us with this particular job. It may be that we want to look at where we're going to be able to place a mini skip. It could also be that we need to assess whether or not this particular tree is going to cause an obstacle for us when we want to get to the property. Now we're sitting here with an aerial view, which makes it quite difficult to see exactly where this particular tree is, and also makes it a little bit harder to see whether or not the driveway starts right here to the left or a little bit over here. So what I'm going to do now is move to our combined street view and aerial view. So just by picking up the little pegman, dropping it on the particular site, we're now able to get a visual of both the property from the air and from the ground. And just to ensure you are looking in the right direction, you can look back at the aerial view and you can see the direction that the street view is pointing. So here we can see that the driveway is indeed underneath the tree. We can also see that we have space for a skip. But if we look a bit closer, we can see that there is a shrub. Now that shrub is visual from the air, but it's not as clear as it is from the ground. So we can now close this. We can then add another marker to say, here is the shrub. That shrub we know that we're going to need to avoid. But we also then can look at exactly where we can fit the skip. So if we're looking at a skip of about 1.8 meters by 3.2 meters, we can then draw that particular object. We can then pick that up, move it to exactly where we believe that it's going to be able to fit. And then we can, we're just going to give this a label. And we're going to call our skip a 4-meter cubic skip. So now we've been able to very quickly identify exactly the area that we need to be working on. We've been able to identify some obstacles. We've also been able to identify that width and exactly where we can fit some of that material to be able to remove it. But what we haven't done is also assessed the access route. So again, by bringing in Street View, we're able to then have a look at the particular site, knowing that we've got this big tree obscuring the view. We can check to the side, at which point we can see that the caravan in the aerial is off to the right. So we can now know that we can get access through this gate. But what we start to see in this imagery is there's a chimney and there's also a dish. Going back to the aerial image, we can now see that there's a dish located here and that the chimney is located in this location. So these become additional objects that we want to then reference on the map. This dish now becomes something that will need to be moved if we are to remove that site and then re-add the roof. And the chimney is going to be an obstacle that we're going to have to consider if we need to bring some equipment on site, and if that has a large or high swing boom to it. So now that we've ascertained that there's a lot more on the site than just that location, we can now ready to package all of that up into a single project. So what I'm going to do now is save all of this as a layer. I'm going to call it quote S75, and I'm now saving that for future reference. Now we can see that we've got all of these particular objects identified. We can go to our vector layers, and we can now see that our particular quote has been saved, and we can make some edits to that particular quote. What we may want to do is change all of those markers to a blue color, and now we're easily identifying between the particular area where the maintenance needs to occur and the objects that we're considering that we may need to navigate as we work on that particular site. Now we've got an option to look at more information about this particular site, not just from what we've seen from the air and from the ground, but also some pre-captured data. So what I'm going to do is turn on our Geoscape Cadastre layer, and that's now given you an overlay of the exact property boundary and the neighbouring property boundaries as well. That can be helpful for knowing exactly where it is that you can work and where it is that you need to consider there may be a site that you may need to get access to and that you may need to make a request to a neighbouring property. In addition to the cadastre, we've also got some pre-captured building information. So by turning on that particular layer, I can now click. I can see the information about the cadastre. That includes the address of the property. It includes the authoritative parcel information if that's required, and gives you an approximate area for the particular site. But what becomes far more useful for this particular job is information about the building. what we've got is information from when this building data was captured and last notified. We've also then provided some very detailed information about the height of the property up to the eaves, the elevation above sea level, but then the typical elevation over that particular site, the material of the roof, and there's even a colour match. And colour match can also then be used to change the overlay of the particular tiled area that needs to be replaced, but it can also be used as a guidance for identifying and ordering materials that will closely match the existing tile type. We've got a total area of the building, and then we can also see that it's a hip-shaped with some tree overhang. So you're able to very quickly capture a lot of information about the site just through a single click once you've turned that particular layer on. Now that we've collected all the information that's required to understand information about the site, we've identified those areas of obscurity and the area of maintenance, we now feel we're ready to be able to extract out that image and include that in a quote. Now, this particular property all of our imagery faces to the north, and this particular property has more of that east to southeasterly angle to the front. Now, this may not be the nicest angle to include when you're doing your quote, and so it's as simple as holding down a control key on your keyboard and then swiveling the map to get it to exactly the orientation that you would like. And now if that becomes the angle that you would like to include in your proposal, you can then simply click on the screenshot tool, and that will capture an image of the property and all of the objects that you've overlaid for inclusion in your report. You can see that it's already downloaded that. If I click on that, it then opens it up, and we can see all of those objects that we have saved. And that's just a small JPEG file that's easily sent or, as I said, added into a particular proposal. Now, there's also very simple ways to get a high resolution image of the particular site without all of the objects that you've included. And that's just a matter of selecting from our download option, choosing the area that you want to include in your download. You can keep the image geo-referenced for simple importation into products like AutoCAD. And then you can simply download that. Similar to what we did with the screenshot tool, once we open that, you can now see you've got that very high resolution image of the particular site without all of those additional objects included. So now that we've got this particular site recorded, we may be working with another party. That party may need to provide a quote about the area of the roof. They may be required to provide a quote for bringing equipment on site. And so we make it really easy for you to be able to export out this project, and then you can send that as through a common file format to the other party that you're working with. And so that's just a matter of hitting export layer. Again, it just exports into your downloads folder, where you can now see that layer, and then you can copy that and include it in an email and send that to the other party. So now that we've gone through how to locate a site, how to identify an area on a site that you need to do a particular form of maintenance or installation, how to identify a number of objects on a site, and then how to save that as a project, we're also going to look at how we can import a project that's been sent to you. that you may then need to import into MetroMap Map Viewer, and you can then undertake your own assessment on. So similarly, we're going to go to vector layers, but this time we're going to go to upload a file. So if someone's emailed you a file and you've saved that to your computer, you're able to then browse to that particular location. Here, we've got one that's already been saved, and we're going to open that and upload that. Now that it's been uploaded, it's just as simple as clicking on Zoom to Layer, and we're now at that particular site with all of the different objects that that person has also previously recorded. Now, it doesn't have to be a file that's been created within Map Viewer. That can be created in AutoCAD, other GIS tools, or Google Earth, and then exported out from one of those tools. And then you're able to easily import that in and go straight to that particular location in MetroMap. We can then turn that layer off, turn off our previous quote, and turn off our cadastre. So now that we've gone through how to export a project and import a project, what we're going to do now is navigate to a complex site, and we're going to look at some of the other tools that we have available to us to be able to get a far detailed understanding of a particular site. So now that we've navigated to this particular location, we can see it is got a lot of trees. There's also quite a lot of shade that has resulted from those trees. So I mentioned earlier that we have a vast back catalogue of imagery. So we provide some simple tools for you to be able to compare a site at two different times. So by turning on the Swipe Compare tool, I'm able to choose from the Australia latest. We look at that, it's our 2nd of October 2025 image. And I'm also going to select one earlier in the year. And what we can see is this image taken in March has much less shade. So our sun angle has changed at this particular season. And so you can access this particular site, make a quick check to see that there is no significant change to that particular location. And then you may determine that that image provides you with a much more clearer view of that particular site. So what I'm going to do is just close our Swipe Compare tool now. And we're going to change our image to select the one from earlier in 2025 to get that much clearer view. Now, for this particular site, we're going to be installing a swimming pool. We know it's a complex site because this area has quite a lot of slope to it. And so we can turn on our dynamic contour layers where you can see contour change at a particular site at 1 meter intervals. As we zoom in, we can see exactly where those rates of change in that slope happen. And we can see that it's quite a large slope at the front of the property, and then it's more gradual as it gets through to the location of the particular area we're going to be installing the pool. So that gives a very, very quick understanding of the site, where that contours change, and a relative view of that particular terrain. But that's not all you need to do. You can also then create a far detailed profile of that particular site. So by turning on our elevation profile tool, we're able to then very quickly draw a profile of the site and understand objects both on the ground, being the terrain, as well as anything that is above the ground. So the heights of the trees, the buildings, and any other objects that may be permanent in that particular location. So as you can see, as I move my way along the profile and I make my way down to this very flat area at the bottom, you can see that we've got both the surface and the terrain changing. You can see from the profile that the height above the ground for this particular part of the building is at 3.1 meters, and that the terrain is relatively stable at that particular location. So with that information, you're now able to produce a far better understanding of that particular site, some of the complexities of the site that could result in needing further equipment to be able to get a pool shell into that site, or other obstacles that may make it difficult to access that site. So similar to our last property, we're also going to turn on the cadastre. And we've noticed that there is a side access route. So similarly, we can then turn on the street view and understand, do we have direct access, or is that now going to be something that is going to be a challenge for us, given the particular site and all of the vegetation that exists at that location. So again, we've been able to look at the contours, understand the relative terrain of the site, but then we've been able to go into a far more detailed view using the profiling tool. We've also then been able to look at what happens at the site from the ground level and from the air. And now we're going to look at how we can use more tooling in areas where there are far more complex building structures that cause many more challenges as you start to negate around these buildings. So we can do that with our oblique imagery viewer. Oblique imagery in MetroMap is imagery that's captured at the same time as our aerials, but it's taken at a 45-degree viewing angle. And with the oblique viewer, you can then determine angles at north, south, east, and westerly direction, as simply by clicking on a particular site. You can see more detail. It may be things on top of a building, it may be plant equipment that needs maintenance that you've been called in to assess, or it may be something on the ground that is otherwise difficult to see from standard aerial imagery that you can then determine by using the oblique imagery viewer. So we've now seen how we can combine aerial imagery with ground imagery through Street View, and now with oblique imagery to see around those high density building areas within a site. Now this gives us an opportunity to talk about some of the other ways that you can consume the imagery from within MetroMap. What we've done is we've demonstrated all of the imagery and the tools and functionality available to you through the map viewer. But we're also able to provide direct access to the imagery through other tools that you may use, like AutoCAD, or other tools like Google Earth or other GIS type tooling. You can access that through our API integration if you're part of our enterprise plan customer base. But if you're using AutoCAD, you can also extract out imagery using the download feature, geofenced, save to your computer, and then you can then upload that directly into AutoCAD. If you're wanting to learn more about some of the tools that you may be using and how you can bring those into, or you can bring MetroMap imagery into those tools, you can simply go to the documentation and then choose on integrations to get a list of GIS and our CAD software. Once you're in our knowledge base, you'll then get detailed instruction on how to access that imagery and upload it, or if it's an API integration, how to and where to include the API key that you've been able to extract out of MetroMap. Now, before we finish, we want to talk about some of the other data layers that we make available to you. So we're focused on that high resolution imagery, that imagery that has a big back catalogue of history. But we also have other base layers that you can access and visualize. That can include imagery overlays. So by turning on streets, you can now see businesses that are in a location. You may be able to see where there's train stations or other areas of interest. It could be schools that may present an obstacle to you when you are assessing a site. In addition to that street overlay, we can also change some of the base layering. So currently we're looking at the street. We can change that to a dark street view, or we can turn on a 3D view of a particular site and location. In this example, when we turn off the imagery, we're able to then look at what that particular suburb looks like and all of the buildings and heights of those buildings. And that provides another 2.5D view to the aerial imagery that we make available to you. We also provide for a satellite base map. That satellite base map will be familiar to you if you use tools like free tools like Google Earth or other free mapping type services, where you don't get that high resolution imagery that we are able to provide through the MetroMap product. And with that, I'd like to thank you all and could hand back to my colleague, Jay, where we can answer any questions that you may have asked during this webinar.
Thank you, Danny, for that insight. So we'll now open up the chat room for the quick Q&As. If you can, we do have the Q&A section available for you to input any questions. Now, Daniel, we do have a question just regarding around searching via coordinates instead of an address. Is that possible?
Yes, it is. So similar to address search, where you click on the magnifying glass, you can choose between address or place or business or coordinates. The coordinates will be dependent on your preferences that you have set. And I'll just quickly check on the preferences, where I'm going to demonstrate that we have multiple projections available. So if you're using the GDA 2020 projection, and that is your preferred option, then when you select on search, choose coordinates, you're then able to enter the latitude and longitude of a particular site, which you can also see is available on the screen down here as well.
Perfect. Daniel, another question we've got is, do we have any tree layers?
Yes, we do. So as part of the MetroMap suite of data layers, with regards to our imagery, we also have the option to bring in our insights layers. So for example, I'm going to bring in a pool, I'll bring in tree, I'll bring in solar. Once we import those in, and then we activate those, we're then able to see them as data overlays. By turning off the imagery, I'm going to turn off that base satellite imagery, which looks terrible. And now you can see the solar panels, the swimming pools, and the vegetation or tree layers.
Perfect. Excellent. Daniel, if we have another question, just regarding about amending any layers, do we have the ability to modify any markings or layers after saving?
So you can create that during the, whilst you're adding those to the map, you're able to give those labels. You're also able to then, once they've been saved, you're able to change the styling of those particular labels. So I'm just going to go to one of those sites we looked at earlier, and I'm going to demonstrate how we can change the color. And then once that's been completed, that's similar to what we've done earlier, it will automatically be saved. Now, once an object has been saved, we can't edit the object, but that is functionality that is coming into the MetroMap map browser in early 2026.
Perfect. Good. Thank you for that, Daniel. We've got some questions regarding our API integration. So one question around that is historical imagery. Is that able to be streamed through the API?
Yes, absolutely. So what we do, if I just click on our imagery for this particular area, we have what's called Australia Latest, which is a tile service, or we've got individual tiles that are able to be accessed through the API on an individual tile basis. We can see the extent of that particular tile as opposed to our entire latest data set.
Yep.
So both are available through the API.
Perfect. Just questions regarding also the downloading ability. Now, some users notice that it downloads as a zip file. Are they able to just download as a JPEG file
So
format?
yes, when you're creating a particular project, you're able to, we just turn this one on and then we navigate to that site. You're able to do a screen grab just to get everything that's on screen. But if it's just the image you're after and you want that just as a JPEG, you can click on download, select the area that you want to include in that download. Then by unchecking the georeference box and then selecting download, a single JPEG is then created. When you include the georeference, it will be zipped up because it contains more geographical information that will be utilized by other products that you may import the image into.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you for that. Just a little bit more around the elevation profile. There was a question just to understand better around the red and blue line and how they will best interpret those lines.
All right, so I'm just activating the tool now. I'm just going to do one simple profile. Now, what we provide is a digital terrain layer, and that is in blue. And then we have our digital surface model. So if I just turn off the digital terrain model, we've now just got the surface model, and that is described as any object that sits above the ground. If I turn on the digital terrain model and turn off the surface model, we're now talking about just the ground. So as we can see here, it's a very flat area. Once I turn the DSM on or the surface model on, we can now see that there is objects that exist above the ground. So the building sits at a height of 2.5 meters above sea or above ground level at this particular location, as shown in that particular profile box there. Whereas the terrain model, we will call ground level. But we do describe the terrain as sitting at 69 meters above sea level. So it gives you an idea of where that is from the coastline and from sea level. But the surface model talks about any object that sits above the ground at that particular location.
Great. Thank you. Another question we've got, Daniel, just regarding any further layers that we might have. Do we have any other layers regarding, let's say, street services, whether it's Stobie poles, sewer locations, or any other sort of markups?
So no, we don't include any sort of utility data sets within MetroMap. It is possible if you do have a copy or a file of those particular utility objects, you can load those in using the upload a file option, and then that will become available to you under your geometry layers that you can call upon at any time.
Perfect. Excellent. Just on, again, on the elevation, the DSM and DTM, are they available via our API key?
So currently we do not make them available. However, that is on our roadmap and we will have those available in early 2026.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. All right, guys. Well, I might finish up for that. I know there were a couple of questions that we didn't get through, but we'll definitely, as mentioned at the beginning, we'll reach out to answer any other sort of specific questions that you have. So just to finish off there, today we've walked through how MetroMap helps you work faster with regular like aerial imagery and how to, I guess, measure and verify sites remotely and how our customers actually cut on-site visits. And I'm guessing most of you are here today because relying on like outdated or inconsistent imagery slows projects down. And that's where MetroMap solves that with accurate, current, and high resolution imagery. Others might be here today to understand more about a Nearmap alternative, for example. So from here today, what you can do is you can register for our 7-day free trial via our website so you can explore the platform for yourself. No commitment. So it's a 7-day free trial that you can just register on our website straight after. And also there are a range of plans that are available and our team can definitely assist with any further questions that you may have. As we mentioned, we will circulate the recording after, so that way you can go back to any of those key features that we've highlighted. But all I want to say is thank you all for joining today, and I hope you all have a great weekend ahead of you. And thank you, Daniel, for your demonstration.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.